Good evening. I'd like to call this. Good evening. I'd like to call this Thursday, May 29, 2025 meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Tonight we'll be following the published and posted agenda. We will be available through Zoom, also available via Chelmsford Telemedia, and recorded for future viewing. The first item on our agenda this evening is a approval of minutes from the April 17th, 2025 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review them?
Yes.
Any changes or comments?
No.
All right, hearing none, I'll take a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of
I
the
second.
April 17th, 2025 meeting.
Seconded very quickly.
Okay. Any comments? Hearing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
5 in favor, 2 absent. Moving right along, we have a review and discussion of the special town meeting warrant Article 1. And the first article is the South Row Elementary School MSBA partial roof replacement. With us this evening is our DPW Director, Christine Clancy.
Good evening, thank you. So the first article is the South Row roof replacement. And there's a presentation to it. That's the next slide. So thank you. So the South Row roof replacement is made up of various sections of roof. We do I know it's been discussed at previous capital planning, is we are coming upon many roof replacement needs given the age of our buildings. And this one is through the MSBA program. As you can see here, the bottom section is the white section. That's the newest section of roof, replaced in 2020 with PVC roof. And then roof section 5, which, just to show, this area right over here, that has about 15 years, 11 to 15 years of life left. All the other areas are included in this project. And so given that, I guess the section shown in red is about 26 years old, and then the section shown in blue is 33 years old, so exceeded their useful life. The existing roof is a built-up roof system, and actually 2 existing roofs, which will explain, now we're at a point where, with MSBA, where we know the level of scope of work needed to do this replacement. Next section, please. So through the MSBA, like I said, we're right now at schematic design. What was submitted was basically a schematic design to the MSBA, and that locks in the cost of this replacement project. So we've done all the assessments. What you see here is a cross-section, and I thought it was helpful to show the cross-section because that really shows the level of detail or level of work needed to do this roof replacement. This isn't just removing a roof and putting a new roof on. This is removing 2 built-up roof systems and then putting a new roof on top of that. So there's additional costs. And so that's all been incorporated into these costs that we're presenting tonight. And so just to kind of highlight, this is the steel deck, which they've also analyzed that. Then on top of that, you have a coal tar pitch built-up roof. That's the original roof. So the original roof in the 60s was never removed. And there's some abatement-related requirements of that roof. And then you have the tapered polyisonerate insulation, and this is all mechanically fastened to the decking. On top of that, you have the perlite insulation, and then this is the newest roof that we have, which is now 26 years old. It's the built-up roof system with the aggregate on top. So that whole cross-section really has to be brought down to here, and potentially some deck repairs. But so it's removing 2 roofs to replace 1. The total in the scope of work, so the total square footage is 38,000 square feet. The replacement would be within new PVC roofing, which matches, as I showed you in the first picture, that white roofing that you see on a lot of our newer buildings or new replacements. Another component in which we knew was that we have solar panels that are 10 years old, which have about 10 to 15 years left life on it. The thought of taking those panels off and putting them back on, you're putting older panels back on a new roof. So what we really wanted to do is put new panels on this new roof. So that's been worked into the cost. It is partially a non-MSBA eligible expense, and I'll get into that expense. But I do think it makes sense to put new panels on a new roof. And there's some efficiencies with the new panels as well. We have 800 existing panels, and then in the proposal, we have looking to put back 500 to match the same load that we would receive. It's just the new panels are more efficient, and that would also help with some of the loading on the roof. There was some indication that the steel decking was slightly stressed, so just trying to relieve some of that load. With the scope too, so that was included in the scope, resetting the panels. What is MSBA eligible is the removal and the reinstalling, but not the purchase of the panels. As part of the MSBA requirements or any requirement, if you spend so much money on a project, upfront money on a project, capital project, where it's about 30% of the total assessed value of the building, you have to do ADA upgrades. And so there are some ADA upgrades required at the entrance. And also there's, I think it's a staff restroom that is not ADA compliant. So that's also been worked into the cost. And then also just removing and reinstalling the HVAC units, electrical coordination, and the roof drains. So that's all typical with a roof project. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what does that cost? That cost about $4.5 million, which honestly, when I first heard it, I was very surprised because originally when we were tracking through our annual cost, we were looking at about $1.5 million based on a $35 a square foot. If you do the math, it comes out to being over $100 a square foot. But when you start to dig into the actual breakdown of the costs, the costs are there where you have 2 built-up roof systems, some decking repairs, the solar panels, the ADA, the designer fee, because it's over $1.5 million, there's an owner's project management fee that's all provided through the MSBA process, and then an owner's contingency of about 5%. So with that 4.5, so the request through the warrant article is $4.5 million. The reimbursement rate that was calculated is 52.26% of eligible items. So with that, when you look at all the eligible items, so the ineligible items are the solar panels, and then some general conditions related to the solar panel install, you're looking at $2.1 million reimbursement coming back to the town. And this would all be planned in the summer of 2026. So it's much needed. I know we have a lot of roof work to do. It's great to have this part of our MSBA program and have that opportunity. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about this article.
I'm noticing the picture with the black and white and the two roofs on top of each other. Are you going to be using the same drill holes, or are you going to be plastering those in and then making new drill holes to hold the
So everything will be brought down. So they have to take apart that coal tar pitch section. So everything's going to be taken out. I guess we wouldn't necessarily be looking to use any drill holes, and so it's a whole new system installed. And when you remove some of that material, you might have to do some repairs to the decking. So it's essentially removing that whole system.
So you're removing the whole system, and then you've got to look at the deck to see how.
Well, I think some repairs. It's not like a full new decking. They're not saying that from the report. It's not taking it down to the steel decking, but potentially some repairs, as because when you remove that coal tar pitch, it might have some needed repairs. So it's just. So
I don't know what perlite is, so that's why I'm asking.
Perlite is this a type of insulation that was used in, I guess I don't know much more about what the definition of perlite is, but it's just a type of insulation. In terms of when you have disposal of this material, or especially down to the coal tar pitch, there is some abatement needed as part of that too. So down to the coal tar pitch, and some of the perlite, there is some abatement as part of that process.
When you say abatement, you mean asbestos?
Asbestos, yes.
Perlite is little pellets of asbestos.
Oh, joy.
And that's a very old insulation that probably hasn't been used for at least, 45 or 50 years anyway.
So thank you. So as far as that, with the abatement, it's all contained. There's no hazards right now. It's when you remove the roofing, and that all will be through the project and done in the summer in a safe process.
So is this something where the kids out on June 16th, you start June 17th?
That would be the hope. I mean, we have to, right now, we're in schematic. We got to take it through design development, construction documents. So the goal would be to start, and actually potentially start removing the solar. We talked about would there be an opportunity to remove the solar panels ahead of time. So we're talking about that. I mean, that would be part of that final design or document development. But yeah, as far as, and then any abatement would be taking place during the construction.
And this, I'm sorry, I have had a long day. Which school is this again?
This is the South Row School.
So would the camp not be run that year? Or-
South Row does not have a camp,
Okay,
yeah.
it's
So it's,
Center does.
Center has a camp, yep,
Okay.
or a summer school.
Would that preclude, because of the asbestos, would that preclude people from using the play area?
No, I don't, I mean, if I understand, I mean, it will be in a contained space, and so it's not something that would be hazard exposed to.
Okay.
It's really just, it's really just the workers. There's a certain process and environmental monitoring that'll take place, but there's really no hazard it's a cost, really. There's control measures put in place so that it's done safely.
And the expected, like, if it's only moderate damage that is expected, it'll take 2 months, 3 months?
It's anticipated in the summer to be substantially complete. So, this will not have an impact to school starting. There might, not to say that there'll still be some work being done potentially in the fall. So we still have to lay out all those fine details, but the goal is to have it done in the summer. With potentially some work starting a little earlier with the solar panels. Also, the solar panels, it will be, we have to putting back solar panels that, we have to wait and understand the delivery time or any of his product lead times. But I would say, the majority of really the removal of the roofing and and the installation of the roofing would be done in the summer.
So if I understand correctly, you'll have less weight with the solar panels that'll have the same capacity as before.
I think what they had indicated was, essentially better weight distribution and less weight. And also the way we have 800 panels, so there is some limited access to some of the HVAC units. So when we place the 500 panels back, we should also have some improved access to some of the, whether it be the HVAC units or drainage units.
Thank you.
So just for clarification, this is perlite concrete, not vermiculite concrete. Vermiculite concrete can contain asbestos, but perlite actually doesn't. It's asbestos-free.
So that's why I don't want to speak about the exact composition. We just know what we've been told is that in this cross-section, and I know it is in the coal tar pitch, and it could be in some contents of perlite, there is asbestos. And so that's the thing is, you can test drywall that shouldn't have asbestos from that age,
And sometimes
it
you can
does.
see it there.
So that's why I can't speak of exactly, but when we went through the testing, and there is some, again, it's not a hazard. It is only, not a hazard right now. I just want to be clear. It's more just, it's an added cost, and then there's controls put in place when we remove it and dispose of it.
When we dispose of the solar panels, are we getting any money back? Are we reselling them?
We haven't crossed that bridge yet, but there is a 20-year payback, and we're only at year 11, so we'll be paying. It's like you're turning in a car before you finish paying off the loan. But when you look at the cost, it makes so much sense to put it, because I'd hate to put old panels back on it, because that has more damage to the roof. So we'll look at potential, stockpiling, salvaging them, and reselling them. I just don't know. The question we did start talking about that, and we don't know if they would be. Would someone want them? So it's a good question, and that's something we will consider.
So the $4 million is excluding any sort of salvage value for the current panels. Right?
4.5 million is excluding any salvage value, but the thought was that it might not be.
Right. You don't want to bake it into the estimate, but
We want to, I guess,
upside.
and that's a good point too, in that this number has to be locked in with the MSBA, 30% design, 30%, and that number we lock in. So we want to be as conservative as possible with, and reasonable. So obviously we'd love for this number to come down as we advance the design, but we can't go back to them for money.
You said lock in the cost. What
Well,
does that
so
mean?
basically, if the MSBA appropriates these funds, kind of like what we do at Capital when we say, okay, we allot, so you allocate those funds. So the MSBA through the state MSBA will allocate the funds to these projects. So that's, I guess, locking it in. So that's their MSBA cost. And so if it comes in at $4.7 million, that additional we'd have to incur
So
that cost.
any overage
we would have
We
to.
would have to absorb.
Yes, that's my understanding is yes. And that's why we have there's also, we're only allowed 5%, but an owner's contingency. So that's, when we built this, built this estimate with the designer or in the OPM, we wanted to have a conservative number and reasonable too.
Back to the solar panels. Given the tariff wars that are going on, don't we create a huge exposure by going with new panels when we've got these panels that still have a 15-year life to them?
No, I mean, the thought, so, I mean, we don't know what the market, that's come up on a lot of projects. We don't know the impact on tariffs. They might have no impact. It might have impact. When we get to that point, I guess what I would say is we're going to go into the project removing and disposing. And then the worst case is, I guess, it's solar ready and we have to install, because I guess the solar panel install is a non-MSBA cost. And so if we had to potentially change it, but we want to put new solar panels on this building. So I guess that there could be more lead times. I don't know if it'd be more. Right now, the indication is that the costs are not skyrocketing.
Can we lock in the cost?
I mean, unless we purchase them today, but to purchase them and store them for a year, I'd be nervous about that. And we don't know what we're designing yet. So I guess we could potentially look at buying them earlier on, but that we're not there yet.
My whole questioning is around not having to have a special town meeting or having to go back and ask for more money because the project ended up higher than what we originally caught. So I'm asking these questions because it would be helpful if we had more detail of each segment of the project and what it was going to cost.
So we just got it for the final version from the MSBA, so I do have, I can run down a quick breakdown of some of the items, if that's helpful.
Could you send it to me?
Yeah, I can send it. I can send you all this. I mean, it is a very itemized. Just to go over some of the high levels. So the feasibility study was $80,000. The owner's project manager, $278,000. The designer is $235,000. And then there's all the reimbursable services that are, the site survey, the construction testing.
Sure. Christie, my real question is, are we able to lock in any of the costs so we know it's not going to go up?
No, never. I mean, because when we bid it, it's based on their bidding. And so, like, as an example, is we put out what was the project? For trees. We just put out a bid to install 25 trees and watering them. I had estimated $35,000. I got a quote for $21,000 and a quote in 5 quotes, and the top quote was $77,000. So what if we never got the two early? What if I got it? So if you take 2 quotes, the 2 lowest quotes out of that, we would have been at $50,000. So like the range that we're receiving is so broad. So it's hard to anticipate what someone's going to bid. You know what I mean? You want to be in the middle. That's your goal, but it's so hard to do.
I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just trying. I guess it's the capital in me because I might have done a little of this at some point in my life. Do we have contracts with these people?
So when you say these people, the contractor
I mean, do we create contracts
with the
that
designer?
have requirements and the ability to control cost at all?
Control cost of the construction, or I guess.
And of the materials
So we have to bid out the work, and then we have a contract. So what we do is right now is we're putting together a detailed scope of services with the specifications and then the quantity. So they take that and then they bid it, and it could be lump sum, could be itemized, and then they provide a schedule of values once awarded. But then that contract where you hold them to is the cost once, and then the change order. There's always not every, but many projects have some change order. It's very, hopefully they're very minor, but there's always an unknown element, which I think here though, we've done we've done a lot of cross sections of the existing roof system. So we're trying to what we're trying to do is do as much investigations now so that we reduce that, risk. But there's always an unknown element to construction, unfortunately.
In the ADA portion of the project, I mean, we should have done that anyway, shouldn't we have? I mean, does it make sense to bury it in this project?
Well, we're obligated to do it through MSBA. They make it part of their requirement. I mean, we could do it now, I guess, if you wanted to, but we're designing it through this project. So
Yeah, my only reason I bring it up, because if this doesn't get approved, we still have the issue, we really need to do that.
well, so yes. I mean, I guess so with the ADA access, it's a little at the end. I mean, when I go into the school, nothing jumps out to me as being, and there's a ramp access. It's just it might not be the same if it's not the same exact pitch. So it's not. So these are minor variations from the ADA, but still not compliant. And then there's a staff bathroom, and there's 2 staff bathrooms, and you cannot get a wheelchair into that bathroom. So really what you have to probably do is take down a wall and make it one larger, it'll be a unisex bathroom. So it's not like it's not an ADA hazard to someone, or a hazard. It's just it needs to be brought up to ADA regulations. So yeah, it is something we should do. It's just it makes sense to wrap it into this project.
We're borrowing this money, John, how long a period do we have for the payback?
Payback or the term?
Term, yeah, I'm
Term.
sorry.
Typically on a project of this scope in previous school projects, you'd be looking at somewhere around 15 to 20 years would be my recommendation, because you're trying to match the term of the bond with the asset's life. And I think we can, in talking with Christine and that, I mean, it's pretty typical your roof is going to last at least 20 years. When it gets beyond 20, as we've seen in town, sometimes it gets dicey, but I would say with confidence you could expect to get 20 years out of a roof.
Yeah, actually, the warranty on this roof is 30 years.
Good.
The new one.
So I'm not too familiar with PVC roofs. So is there is that a common thing now? Is it
Yes.
well documented, well vetted? It's a legit, warranty that will be upheld, all that good stuff.
Yes.
So the other roofs are whatever that material is?
The white roof you see is a PVC roof. The black roof is a EPDM. They call it membrane
So the new
roof.
roof would be the white roof, would also be
Yes.
white?
Yeah, and I think also you sometimes you also want to you want to have similar materials. So from a maintenance, so a lot of the new roofs that we've been installing and PVC is popular to do. And plus, in terms of having it white versus black, there's reflective ability. There's some benefits to that as well.
What does owner's project management and owner's contingency mean?
So owner's project management, the state requires that if you have a building project of an estimated cost of over $1.5 million, you need an OPM, or owner's project manager. And so essentially you have to hire, it's a manager that helps manage the project on behalf of the owner, but we jointly work together. But it's required by the state to have that. So
So would we hire them, or does the state hire them?
so this project is through the MSBA process. We're assigned one. When we do our other capital projects, we're hiring them. So that's the thing, is we can't negotiate a fee. We have no ability to do that in this process.
Okay.
Years ago, you would have called it a clerk of the works.
Right.
That's what was traditionally known as the clerk of the works. Basically, it's this on-site supervisor who's watching that the work's done in conformance with the bid specifications.
And contingency?
So contingency is owner's contingency is you always want to have some contingency for a project. That's the goal, because 9 out of 10 times there's some change order to a project. If you look back at any project, there probably was some minor variation. You hope it's minor. You want to be under, essentially an average. What I say is, if you have a project that's just a couple percent, that's a good project. You want to be the lower percentage of the overall cost of additional costs. Something could come up, so you want to have a supply of funds to use it. So that is reserved for the owner. So it's not shown to the bidders or to the contractor as a cost. It's basically our savings that we have set aside funds for this project so that if we have to use it, we can. So it's good to allocate some funds to it. 5% is it's kind of minimally what you want, but 5% is
Why
is
not
good.
make it more?
So the MSBA only allows you to do 5%. So we could put more in, but then that just numbers. So we could, but it's just because sometimes you don't need it. You know what I mean? But you more often need something. You know, there's always something small or something.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
All right, seeing none, we'll go right along to a review and discussion of the special town meeting warrant Article 2, elevator replacements for the Chelmsford High School, Westlands Community Education Center, and McCarthy Middle School.
Okay, so, thank you. So this is a request for additional funding for the school elevators. And just to kind of go over, what I'll do is I'll kind of, this first slide here is to show just a little bit of the back history of how we got to where we are today. So, so we, you know, when we prepare our capital plan, we look at, you know, upcoming, we do a 5-year capital plan, and often we also consult with different vendors to help estimate some of the costs for replacements. So in 2022, we had it's not even called the full assessment, but a study done to say, well, can you look at all of our elevators? Because we know because of the age of the buildings, the elevators are aging. And if you can recommend repairs, repairs or replacements for these elevators. Elevator Engineering conducted the study in 2022, and they provided some recommendations. And I can get into that in a couple of slides. So from there, we made some recommendations between FY24 capital and FY25 capital for the elevator project. So in FY24, we appropriated $325,000 for the community ed building, and we also appropriated $480,000 for the high school elevator project. And then in FY25, we appropriated $325,000 for the McCarthy elevator. Those projects, so we have a large backlog of projects. And also, I think going back the past year, we've really focused on ARPA. So there's still some previous year's capitals that we still have to focus on. And so when we were coming upon this beginning of this past year, past calendar year, we said, well, you know what, we have three school elevator projects. Let's combine them because it might be good to have one design for these three elevator projects. We do have separate town elevator projects, but one design. So we combined that into one project at that $1.13 million. That RFP was put out last year, or end of last year, and then next slide, please. Actually, so yeah, thank you. That was put out last year, and assessment was done this spring. So the 2022 assessment, this is the assessment that Elevator Engineering did. So what they had, this is what their assessment essentially was. The CHS elevator is 50 years old, 3 floors. It has a buried hydraulic cylinder that should be considered for replacement. So a lot of older elevators have their hydraulic cylinders are buried into the ground. They're potentially prone for rust or deterioration. So the recommendation is to replace many of these age. Also, at the time, they had said all major components are beyond their useful life. I do have some cost information later that they had some recommendations, so when I get into the cost, I'll share that. And then the McCarthy and Community Education elevator assessments. Essentially, it sounds like those two elevators probably went in around the same time because they were essentially almost identical elevators. 35 years old, 2 floors. There's one additional stop at the community ed, even a half-level stop. Overall, good condition with dated components, buried hydraulic cylinder that should be considered for replacement, and then they also recommended replacement of car and hall buttons for the controller components. So that was the extent of the study that we used to help inform us of the FY24 and FY25 capital needs. So with the one project of the 3 schools, we hired BLW engineers, and that was just this past winter. So they did with their team, they did a very detailed assessment to prepare a schematic design that was just completed this spring. And so they are recommending more extensive replacement, essentially replacing almost all components of all elevators. And with that comes additional costs, and I will get into some cost information. And they did a very detailed, I have the report here, as a very, very detailed assessment, going really every single component of the elevator, also all code requirements. So this is the summary of their replacements, and with that we also have costs. So they're essentially at the schematic design. Extensive replacements recommended at each location. That includes relocating all controls, mechanical, electrical, and cab components, so a full replacement, I would say, just about. And then there's additional electrical infrastructure upgrades required for this work to take place. There's also some additional code requirements that you require so that the code requires that the mechanical room be heated and cooled, and those spaces are not heated or cooled, so we have to bring in that a split system to heat and cool those systems. And with the budget that I'll go over the next few slides, that brings it to over $1.5 million. And that threshold is where you need an owner's project manager. So we will now have to hire an owner's project manager to help with this project. And that is required by state procurement requirements. And then also, I think when we look at all the cost comparisons, there probably was some escalation going back to 2024-25, this industry, but so thank you. The next slide here is, so this is to kind of show, and I have the next slide, I'll go into a little more cost information. So we had, so now this is the revised cost from this revised report, the detailed report we have from BLW. The Chelmsford High School elevator, essentially full replacement, is $565,000. The community education elevator is estimated at $570,000. The McCarthy Middle School elevator is estimated to be cost $545,000. That brings you to $1.68 million. Then you add on the owner's project manager, which is an added requirement. We're estimating $75,000 because we're bringing them in a little later. Like we'll be bringing them in at essentially like probably 60% design. And then owner's contingency, it is good to have one, so we recommend that. And that brings you to an overall estimate of $1.83 million. The original allocated through FY24 and FY25 was 1.13. So this warrant article request brings you to $700,000. Just to show you a little more background or breakdown of each of the elevators. So the Chelmsford High School elevator conveying system it costs $345,000. And the general construction conditions are $70,000. The mechanical upgrade requirements, which really relate to more of some of the coding requirements, $50,000. The electric system requirements, $60,000. And the design component is $40,000. That brings you to $565,000. In the 2022 assessment, the assessment that I had shown you, the very limited study, they had said $120,000 for the repairs or replacement that they had recommended, and we had carried $480. I guess we knew that the 120 had some, I guess that was really tied to some elevator components, but we had budgeted $480,000. And also there was, right before we finalized those capital requests, we did have some conversations with elevator engineering, because they do a lot of elevator assessments, and say like, what's the going rate for a 2-floor, 3-floor story? So those costs that were recommended were kind of based on that assessment and discussions with the vendors too, what the current construction costs are for some similar work. The community education elevator replacement, very similar. It has a cost breakdown. Elevator conveying system $350, general construction $75, mechanical upgrades $50. And essentially for each one of I would say the level of replacements recommended for each of these elevators is essentially the same. You're just varying a little bit depending on some of the requirements for each of the schools. And And the 2022 assessments for both the community ed and the McCarthy recommended $117,000 in repairs or replacements, and we had budgeted $325,000. So that brings us to the request of $700,000, and it is substantiated through this new schematic design detailed assessment. And I guess one thing that we have, like when we got these costs, obviously we don't like to come back and ask for money. Something we want to make sure we're right the first time. We were going off of that elevator engineering, that previous assessment, that study. I guess one thing we are doing, I know it might be a question, is that we have used ARPA money or other funds to help advance some of these larger projects. An example is the library HVAC system. If you ask me right now what that costs, I can't tell you, but we've started to allocate money towards it. Same with the McCarthy roof system. We've started to roof replacement. We've allocated some money to it, and we're starting that process. But we really have to take it to almost a schematic design to be able to better lock in that number. And we didn't do that here. Here we were doing a study to try to estimate. So I think something that we've done just in the past 2 years is try to get those studies in before we request the entire capital request. Are there any questions? Yes.
How long are these new elevators scheduled to last?
So, I would say some are 50.
No, I know the old ones, but what are the new ones? If they're replaced, they will last 30 years, they will last 40
So,
years.
I would say probably, I know we design, a lot of designs are to 50, 70 years. But I would say 40, 50 years. I guess I have to get it's not warranted that long, but I would say typically anything new. So the roofs were 20 years, now the 30 years, I would expect at least 40, 50 years. I don't know if new elevators are more or less, but I would say around 40, 50 years probably.
I'm on the finance committee. I'm on the capital, and this is over a 50%
Yes, significant.
more. So I feel like I failed doing my job. I
Well,
just do.
Yeah.
Okay, when we have projects, and it's this much more. I don't blame you. It's a process. Okay, so please, I'm just saying, what are we going, is there any changes that are going to come as an outcome of what we've learned here with the elevators?
Well, I think also you're still at the mercy of the bidding environment too. So that's the thing too, is that the bidding environment, I think, is because and I did make some phone calls to neighboring communities. I was talking to Lowell, and they did a 2-floor elevator project, and that was $325,000. I was like, oh, okay, that's similar. So, and I actually just talked to them because they have elevator projects in their future, and they have the same amount budgeted that we have for a 2-floor. So I think partial is industry, and it's hard to predict industry costs. But I think the best thing to do is to try to get as far into the design as possible before we request that overall cost. So instead of having, the elevator assessment, they did a very, very quick assessment, and that's what we paid them for. Whereas for this more detailed schematic design, I would say, right before, probably conceptual, so 15-20% design, we have this more detailed cost. So we are doing that for many of the unknown projects. If you ask me how much a roadway costs or how much a parking lot costs, we have very good cost data on that, and we can we're very close. When you get into a building and there's so many unknowns and there's so many variables, it's hard to pick and then the bidding environment, there's so many potential unknown. So I think the best thing we can do is get as much as possible into the schematic design or to the schematic design. So I think in the future requests for these larger projects, you're going to see partial capital requests, and then we will ask for a balance.
That's what I wanted to hear. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? So there'll be a period of public comment later on in our agenda. Yep. All right. Any further questions?
The only other thought here is, the owner's project manager. How much value do we get out of that?
I mean, it is helpful to have someone on board. I mean, we have so many projects at DPW, so having another set of eyes definitely helps. I mean, we had talked to each other. I was like, could we do it? It's like, yeah, you could put someone on it, but it's full time. I just don't have the body to have someone do it. So there is value in that. Otherwise, we'd have to hire someone. So hire like another employee. So I think there's value. We need. I mean, we have so many projects going on the next few years that putting this in is honestly a huge help to us. It's a help, and it's a benefit to the project too. Because the worst thing that can happen is this goes through, and then it's a horribly managed project with all these problems. So it's you're buying you're buying some security that's going to be a better
Insurance,
project. Insurance.
But also it's required above 1.5 million.
It's required, but I guess it's required to allocate. So I guess you could if you have the right qualifications, and I believe you might have just MCPPO. You could have someone, but we don't have someone to allocate full time to this, or near full time.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving along, we have a review and discussion of the special town meeting warrant Article 3, Community Preservation Fund, Coolest Farm Perimeter Survey. And with us this evening is Paul Cohen, our town manager.
Great. Good evening, and thank you. Appreciate you coming out in end of May for this work related to a special town meeting. And as you can see, why we had to do this is we're really driven by the MSBA process. And as Christine mentioned, we've received approval for the roof project. And again, the key from their perspective is we can only do these projects during the summertime. And therefore, we couldn't wait till October, because if time we get out of town meeting in October, we wouldn't have had sufficient time to do the design, the procurement, to get the best prices that we can get for work that we want to begin, on June 18th or whatever day school lets out next summer. This one on the Coolest Farm Perimeter Survey, this is a request for $33,600. And it's basically, it's to perform the required task of doing what they call a baseline survey of the property to be submitted as part of the conservation restriction that will be placed on the property. The challenge here is you were dealing with 4 parcels of land that total 41.91 acres. And so it's going to take extensive work. We went out and obtained multiple quotes in order to perform this work. This is the amount that is the low quote and what we believe we can have this work performed for. And then they'll also go out and do the stakes of the property lines. So this was, this is a requirement and a known entity. And we will submit this eventually to the state for approval. And we're required under the Community Preservation Act to do a restriction on the property, and this is the survey work that's required for that. It's not that work we didn't anticipate when we acquired the property. Unfortunately, when we acquired the property, it was in a condition that the surplus funds that were available were utilized basically for the cleanup and legal work regarding the property. And so here we are now into the restriction phase of the project. We need the additional funding.
Any questions?
I have a couple.
Sure.
When you say staking, is that a permanent marker?
Yeah, yes, they'll put staking and markers in
I
areas.
when you say
Yeah.
stake, I think a little piece of wood.
Yeah, or basically a metal rod, because what the concern is with these properties, and we obviously have a number of already acquired and restricted properties, is the holder of the restriction then goes out at a later date to make sure there's no infringements on the conservation property. So, for example, a property like at Sunny Meadow Farm, there are, like these properties, there are jagged or irregular lot lines, and then so what happens is they go out and they look to make sure that be able to mark the properties to make sure there's no infringements on the conservation land. So that's why it's done. Because you'd say, well, gee, why we do that? We have aerial photography. We could just
No,
look
that
at
I
it,
get.
but
So you
that's
just
why it's done.
So the staking is done to
Yeah.
make sure
Put-
that the abutters also know. Oh,
Exactly.
Yeah, this is the coolest farm, and this is your
Not
yard.
your land, right,
Okay,
exactly.
could you give me a little bit of orientation, because I'm not
Sure.
sure where I am.
Sure, the yellow strips going through it are Interstate 495.
Right.
You see number 1, that's 185 Pine Hill Road. If you go to the right of that, that's Hunt Road. And then basically, you're right near Weston Nurseries. If
Where's,
you-
okay, where's,
If you go by Parley's and Weston Nurseries, you're coming down Pine Hill Road towards
Okay.
Westford.
so it would be kind of behind where the Parleys,
Yeah, depending on which way you're going, it's really in front. So basically, you're coming there. If you're at the corner of, and Weston Nurseries is on your left, as you're going down towards Westford on Pine Hill Road, you pass Weston Nurseries on the left, and you come up the hill, and it's right there on the right. That's where you are. And then Parley's, their land is in the back, abuts the back for, if you kept going straight on Hunt Road, you would go to the Parley's farm stand.
and the green means wetty wet?
Yeah, green is wetlands, yeah.
Okay.
So again, this is, part of the work required to submit the documents to the state and to the restriction holder.
And is it like looking at those 2, 3, and 4? Is there ever a way of like combining them after this work is done, just to
Well-
simplify the management and maintenance of it?
Well, yeah, they'll all be under one maintenance. The problem with 1 and 2 is they're on the opposite side of the street.
Right, I just
And-
mean like the
and
things that
three
are
is,
abutting.
3 is basically underwater. It's wetland,
Yeah.
that's why you see it as all green. 4 is somewhat wet. There is a little bit of dry area up there. I've been on that property, and there's some talk, it used to be hayed years ago, and there was some talk about growing pumpkins or some other crop on their property.
Yeah, this is just like a very
Yeah.
minor like town administration thing. If you have 2 abutting things owned by the same owner, can you combine the 2 for purposes of record
Yep.
keeping, so you only have to track 1 parcel instead of 2 parcels?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying like 3 and 4,
Right.
Yeah.
because they're not, the line is just a line.
But in practical consideration, you're not going into 3 anyway, because you're going through wetlands.
Right.
And I bet this time of the year with the rain we've had, it's probably underwater.
So Paul, this is just for the survey work, correct?
Yes, just for the survey work, yep.
And it's required no matter what
Yeah.
the land is being used for under the
Exactly.
CPC?
No matter what it is, how it is, it has to be surveyed. So we're not gonna get into a discussion on how it's gonna be used or why, that's not what this is about.
Take a deep breath.
That's it,
It'll be asked.
I'm sure it'll be asked.
It'll certainly be asked, yeah.
I know.
That's not the scope of this
This-
article, regardless of
I
the
know it
use.
will be.
There has to be a survey,
Yeah, no matter what,
no matter what.
yeah.
And so you're saying the stakes, when you say stakes, it's metal rods, because I just,
So typically, meets, where 2 property lines meet,
yeah,
there's going to be an iron rod or an iron pin.
Okay.
And sometimes you'll see staking along, the wooden staking you're talking about, the flags.
Yeah.
Typically, there might be marks along the bounds of the property at certain locations as they're doing the surveying to track where they are along that property. So if you're looking at 1, there are really 4 meets. You'll see in that property. The 4 corners is a relatively square piece of property.
Yeah.
I would expect that they'd probably, if they aren't already there, they'll either identify pins that are already there because they were at some point in the past it was surveyed, and they'll have to find and identify those meets, those iron pins, or
just looking at the map with 1, there seems to be property things on it, but is that something known to be on it?
so this is GIS. So GIS is not legal
Okay,
description of where things are located on the land. It may be that there might be an encroachment. We don't. That's why the survey is so important. They need to determine whether or not there's an encroachment on the property. But typically, when you're looking at a GIS map, it's going to show you approximately where things are located, but it's not a legal definition of where things are located on the property.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you. Moving along, we have a review and discussion of town meeting warrant article 4, collective bargaining agreements, and with us again is Paul Cohen, our town manager.
Yeah, this is a funding request to fund a collective bargaining agreement with the town's library union. This would be for a 3-year period from starting this July 1st, the upcoming fiscal year, through June 30th of '28. At this point in the time, you may recall a town meeting a month ago, we funded the 3 police contracts. We have 6 organized bargaining units at this point. This would be the 4th one. The 2 outstanding are the dispatchers and the firefighters union. We met with them since spring annual town meeting in an effort to bring articles to this town meeting. We were successful with the library union. It's a 3-year agreement. The wage increases to the compensation schedules are 3%, 3 1/4, 3 1/4. There also is a minor increase in the longevity schedule by $250 over the current longevity amounts. And then we basically accelerated the vacation accrual leave by 1 year, and we sort of cleaned up language, because the way it works now is under years 1 through 5, somebody would be eligible for 2 weeks vacation, and then upon the 5th year, they would get a 3rd week of vacation upon the completion of arriving to the 3rd year. And then the same thing would happen at years 10 and years 20. And so what we did was we did away with the additional year thing and just said, let's go, all right, we'll go through years 1 through 4, you'll get 2 weeks, then you get 3 weeks from years 5 to 10, and then and so forth. So that was what the cleaning up of the languages and the acceleration by 1 year. And then there's a typo there. The vacation carryover was increased from 5 days to 10 days. So that's a typo. I'll correct it for town meeting. I was shocked when I looked at it and said, my gosh, it's not 20 days, it's 10 days.
There you go.
As you can see, the concern was the vacation leave accrual, but then on the other hand, many employees want to carry over vacation because of whatever reasons. So basically we said, we'll allow the extra 5 days. It's really not a material cost. And then there were just minor language changes in the agreement. Some of it was just cleanup of old contract language. For example, there was one section in the MOA where it referred to the library construction projects. That shows you how long the language had been in the agreement. And one thing towns and unions are not good at is sort of cleaning up the residuals from previous agreements. So we basically did that type of housekeeping and minor work. So that's the agreement. It is in line, as I said at town meeting, and I'll say continually, we obviously as a town we have to look at the market, and we do, and we have data for that in terms of what's a library earning in comparable communities, and then obviously we got to recognize what's it's anticipated in terms of inflation. Then we also have to anticipate what the town's resources are, and this agreement, I think, fulfills all those objectives. And so it has been ratified by the union, and the select board have ratified it. And the final step of a contract ratification is town meeting has to fund the initial year of the contract, because that's all town meeting can fund is 1 year at a time. But that first year approval approves the agreement for the duration. And then we then turn to the town accountant and the library director and have them do the cost analysis of what precisely do we need, and that number is the number requested because it was brought to us from the town accountant with the input from the library director in terms of going through each employee. What's the nice part about this is where it's prospective, we're not doing retroactive,
Yes.
which is the bane of their work, because it's just a lot more work. So that's what we're looking for into this agreement is just over $55,000.
Okay.
Paul, how many employees are covered?
It's a question of, it covers full and part-time employees. So you're dealing with a few dozen employees, quite frankly, that run the gambit. And the library is much an unusual environment because they have, full-time employees, and then they have gradients of part-time employees. Some people work 24 hours, some of them want to work 20 hours, but the contract actually covers 15 and above hours per week employees. So it won't cover the library pages and so forth. They're not part of the bargaining unit, but basically it covers what I would call regular full and part-time library employees.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. Moving along, we have a review and discussion of special town meeting warrant Article 5, the private mausoleum regulations.
Yeah, this is an article submitted by the Board of Cemetery Commissioners, and what this is, believe it or not, state law requires that town meeting approve regulations made by cemetery commissioners. Obviously, this must be an ancient state law, and obviously it went to the sanctity of burial places, as you can imagine a society would do, but that's still required. So even in the year 2025, the town meeting has to give approval to a regulation by the cemetery commissioners for private family mausoleums, and I put a picture of it because I'm sure people are wondering, well, what's a private family mausoleum? And clearly this is above the ground, but but the town meeting still has to approve the regulation, and I'm fortunate that I have a finance director who was a cemetery commissioner at one point, or a cemetery superintendent, whose wife is a cemetery commissioner. So I have a lot of experience to draw upon, as well as, we know very important people in this community serve as cemetery commissioners. So anyway, here's what the regulations, and I've accompanied the regulations in the handout I sent to you. I'm also going to accompany the regulations at town meeting, because we just want to be transparent and make sure the voters feel comfortable, like, what are we approving? And it's only like a 3-page regulation, but in summary, for example, it regulates that the minimum size of these mausoleums would have to be 400 square feet, with a 3-foot setback on all sides. And obviously, that's out of respect for the adjoining people who bought cemetery parcels to, it's kind of like, zoning for cemeteries. You
You don't like your neighbors, yeah.
You want to have setbacks, yeah. And obviously, the design of these, it has to be approved by the cemetery superintendent, so you want them to be tasteful and sound in terms of
Overlay.
construction.
What's that grievance process look like?
We're talking about my future home now.
And so when the work is performed, it has to be returned, the landscaping has to be brought into a pre-construction condition. So again, reasonable regulations that you would expect would happen for this. There is a perpetual care requirement, obviously, because in this case, it equals 10% of the mausoleum construction cost. And then there are rules about, well, what goes in these, and as you can see, the regulation is that one casket inside each crypt of the mausoleum structure. So those are what I, as a layperson, thought were the highlights of the regulations. So
is that-
yes, that's basically the presentation. And there are different types. This is just I took this one because it was the script. It didn't have anybody's name on it. Didn't have any. It was just something that is what I'd call a typical mausoleum.
Is this a 2-person?
Yeah.
When I see mausoleums, mostly it's on movies in Louisiana, because they have to have mausoleums, because you can't bury anybody in the ground, because the ground's too flippin' wet and you can't do any burials. Is there any height restriction?
I imagine there must be a height restriction, I'm sure, because I don't know off top, I don't recall it in the
I
regulations.
don't think it's in the regulation. Hold on.
I was actually thinking that, because like, you could build up a city, right?
Yeah.
Within-
See if there is a height restriction.
Right, and so the other thing is also in those same movies, Louisiana voodoo movies, is the statuary that is part of the mausoleum is kind of creepy. So is there any rules on the statuary? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I was just looking at the height, foundation,
It's not in the regulations.
not in the regulations,
So we can have a city.
yeah. I mean, there's foundation requirements.
Skyscraping mausoleums.
That's-
You said minimum, is there a maximum?
Yeah, so that would be the, because
I mean, a minimum requirement of 400 square feet,
Yeah, is there a maximum?
I think that's what goes,
To be a setback.
Has to be
on
a
all three
setback.
sides, so
Yeah.
it couldn't be excessive.
right, so you can't be wide, but how tall can you be, and what can you
We should have
put,
had your wife here.
what can you decorate your mausoleum
Yeah.
with?
Yeah, there's the exterior specification.
the exterior specifications here, shall be cut granite not less than 10 inches in thickness. Roof pieces shall have adequate drip edges. All metalwork must be standard bronze compliant with the specs of the U.S. Bureau of Standards, and so forth. So
Is there any statuary allowed, statuary not allowed?
Doesn't look like it.
Other memorials.
Yeah, I don't believe there is any, yeah.
I think it has to be set locally.
Yeah.
So
Discuss that with David.
right there, floor memorials will be removed whenever they become sightly or the discretion of the superintendent.
No, but
Yeah.
I'm talking like.
Monuments and stuff like that. It's saying.
Permanent.
Permanent and angel, they always have, like I said, in the same voodoo movies, some like angel with a nicked wing looking very desperate. So you're in a spooky place
Right.
where voodoo.
Yeah, I mean, it basically says the superintendent reserves the right to reject the design because of size, material, configuration, or method of construction. So I think that addresses the size issue and
You also have the cemetery shall only permit a 2x1 flush marker memorial to be placed on the same lot with a family mausoleum.
Any idea what the average cost of one of these would be?
Any idea, John? I have no idea. I have no idea.
Before, so.
Yeah, I have no
So-
idea. I
so
imagine
I-
they're not cheap.
So I think my other question is, why now? We've never had them before, why now?
Yeah, so in talking with Superintendent of Cemeteries, David Boyle, he's had a number of requests from residents and also to, when he looked at it, it makes better use of the space that you have, because you figure if you had a family one and you could have 4 people in crypts in the space that we normally just have 2 ground burials. So he looked at it as it solves a customer want, and it potentially has the potential to bring in more revenue for the cemetery.
And that's where I was going to, is like 10% of the cost. I'm trying to gauge like how much is that, and is there incremental demands into perpetuity, liability on the town for maintaining these?
Yeah, that's why they're creating the fund. I can ask David to provide some estimate. We can ask him to provide some sample quotes, and the fund would be held by in custody of my office, the treasurer's office, for the cemetery. And it would be dedicated for the future maintenance of the mausoleum.
Yeah, much like the perpetual care is currently for the
Yes.
cemetery in general. Any other questions?
So basically, the height and statuary and other kind of permanent fixtures are under the discretion of the cemetery commissioner?
The superintendent, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. But I'm sure there'll be the height restrictions will be affected by the ability to actually construct something that's going to stay in place. You're not going to build a 50-foot tall
No,
mausoleum.
I'm just, like I said,
It's
the ones you see in the voodoo movies are about,
the ones, Louisiana, they tend to be like 20 feet tall sometimes.
yeah, because there is no under.
Yeah.
I mean, I think based on the comment, John, you just made, it sounded like the vision is that you could have basically 2 and 2. It would have 4 on a plot for 2.
And do the crypts have different regulations for the kind of, you have a casket goes in the ground, so is it a crypt casket, a different kind of casket?
They recommend, it actually is in the regulation, they recommend metal, but they will allow wood.
Okay.
Oh, they'll allow wood.
They will allow wood, but they recommend metal.
Yeah,
And I
'cause
think the
it-
thought process is it is encased. It's granite with a steel door. It's not going to be opened. Yeah,
All right, so there's,
hopefully.
again, I only know from like voodoo
above
movies,
ground.
so I don't know, so it's like, I didn't know there was a metal door. See, I didn't know that.
That kind of ruins the saying, and everything above ground's a good thing. Kind of.
So no 6 feet under,
David,
2 feet above.
Sorry about that.
You can remain topside every day in perpetuity. You're topside.
I surrender.
All right. Any further questions on this one? Hearing none. Next on the agenda, we have a period of public comment. We ask anyone making public comment come up to the podium. They state their name and their address for the record, and then proceed with their comment.
Hi, good evening. My name is Liz Horinowich. I live at 3 Azalea Court. I'm a town meeting rep, and I figured I'd come in person rather than watch it on TV. And I have 2 questions, I think. The first one is on Article 2, the school elevators. And basically, can you confirm, I thought I heard you say that the McCarthy elevator was in good condition but dated.
That was the
Uh,
report.
If you could come to the microphone, please.
So that was the extent of the assessment that was completed in 2022. That is what it had said. It says in good condition, but it's dated.
And the reason,
So,
I mean,
I think the reason that they put that forward when it was in good condition was McCarthy School has 1 elevator. And if that elevator fails during the school year, then there's real problems with the school in terms of accessibility for people who need to utilize that elevator. And so the idea was we didn't want to get into a situation where we were reacting to an elevator failure. And so at the time in '22, it's like, let's get onto this project because we want to replace it so that we don't cause chaos in the schools by the fact that the one elevator is down. And for example, that's going to be a problem in this building where we are tonight. When the elevator that goes to this floor tonight is the sole elevator, when that elevator is replaced, we will not be able to hold meetings or anything in this level of the building because it won't be fully accessible. So applying it to the school situation, we knew at the time that the elevator was in good operating condition, but it was at the end of its useful life, and we wanted to be ahead of the replacement rather than dealing with the failure of the elevator, which could then create chaos for the students and the school operations.
Right, but you never have two elevators in the schools, right? I mean, that.
Oh, sure, the
fit-
high school does.
The high school has two?
Yes.
But the new plan is not to have two in the
No,
car.
exactly.
Correct, right.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I
it
think,
just seems, if it's good, and, you know, we keep hearing we're in this condition of unprecedented, I'm sorry to interrupt. You know, why?
If you could
if it's
just
good,
come to the
why
mic,
would
please, so we can catch it.
Reduce the owner, you know, would bring the project under
Excuse me.
1.5 million.
If you could just speak to the mic
Speak
so we can
into
catch
the
it.
mic.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, well, yeah, it just didn't make sense to me if something is in good working order to replace it at that cost and bring it up to a level where you have to add more costs for the owner,
Okay.
70K. I mean, we're in a state where every time we have a town meeting, we hear it's unprecedented budgets, we don't know what's gonna happen, should we be more cautious? I don't know. And I guess my next question, it's just a statement, and, you know, something we all need to think about, was the farm, Article 3. I mean, I'm a town meeting rep, so I thought I heard when this went through that the seller was responsible for doing all the cleanup of that land. There were cars all over the place and things. So if the seller was responsible, and the money that should have been spent on the survey was spent on that cleanup, can we go back to the seller and say they should have done it?
No. The property was not sold on the seller cleaning up the property. The property was sold as is to the community. I think it's fair to say that no one recognized the extent of the cleanup until we got into it. But that's just the nature of buying a property. And in this case, you know, we did not have recourse against the seller. You know, again, when you make the purchase, you allow costs that are legal costs and so forth when you do the estimate, and what we call related costs to the transaction. But clearly, when we got into the property, that became better known. So that's where we are today. But no, we have no recourse to go back to the seller.
And Paul, this was a
property.
closed bid process that was.
Right, it was a sealed bid process. We submitted a sealed bid, as is, you know, much like if you're buying a home, as is, and that was the contingency, and you know that's just how some things turn out.
Okay, sorry about that, because I thought I had heard that the seller had to remove all those old cars and everything, you know?
Nope.
No. Town got stuff for that.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, next on our agenda is a discussion and vote on the recommendations for special town meeting warrant articles. Our Cindy is not here to make the motions this evening. So the first article up for review and discussion for a vote is Article 1, South Row Elementary School partial roof replacement, and I'll entertain a motion concerning that.
I say let's talk about this
Or is it, this
So-
part, Cindy
so-
usually covers this so well.
Make the motion first,
make
then
the motion
then we can
first.
discuss it.
In order to open, in Robert's Rules of Procedure, in order to open up a discussion regarding a certain article warrant vote, you'll typically make the motion, second it, and then open discussion. We'll close discussion when there's no more discussion, and then we'll proceed to the actual vote.
So now we're waiting for the second of the
So
opening?
we need someone to make a motion regarding this article, whether or not we recommend approval or not. And they'll have
Oh,
someone
okay, so
second
this
it,
is-
and then we'll have discussion.
I recommend that we approve Article 1, South Row Elementary School partial roof replacement
In the amount of,
in the amount of $4,527,956.
I second it.
discussion.
It's
And
got to
Elaine, if you
get
could
done,
pull
it's
the
an
mic a
old
little
roof.
closer to you.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you.
It's got to get done, it's an old roof.
Yeah. I think
The only comment I simply have is I'm very concerned about it not being a lot more money before we're through.
Yeah.
It does have, to circle back to the earlier part of the movie, Cole's Farm, oh my God, there's so much stuff there. When we take off the roof, or people take off the roof, they'll be like, oh, this unknown thing. Yeah, but that's actually any major construction project where you're going in deep, you're going to find these things.
And we have a 5% contingency on that, which is about $227,000. So there is a contingency that's built into this particular amount. And we're looking at a $2.1 million effectively reimbursement at the end of this project because it's MSBA. So that we need to factor that in. Whether or not there's any other additional cost savings, we don't know. Whether or not we have to use all or a portion of the contingency, we don't know. Hopefully less than more. But I think with the schematic design that's been done now, I think we have a much better understanding and are a lot further along the process to proceed. And I understand the need. I mean, this article is really the reason why we're here for a special town meeting. The other ones are just thrown on because we can also take care of those things now as well. This needs to start beginning of next summer. So I'm certainly in favor of proceeding.
And it won't get any cheaper if we wait.
No.
No, and it has to be done.
There is if I heard the Director Clancy correctly, there is a possibility that we can get some reclamation on the existing solar panels. That's a possibility.
It's a,
Possibility.
so you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Right? I'll take it.
Any further discussion?
No, straightforward.
All right. Hearing none. All those in favor?
All right,
Aye.
That's 5 in favor, 2 absent. Article 2. School elevator replacements.
Your turn. It's your turn. You're the new guy.
I make a motion that we recommend to approve Article 2, school elevator replacements in the amount of $700,000 as written.
I second it.
Discussion.
Having had children who have had sports injuries and had to wear casts and stuff, the elevators, yeah, they want. I can particularly one boy, like, I'll take the stairs, Mom. It's like, dude, you broke one foot, you're not going to break the other. So the elevators do, and there are kids who are permanently in wheelchairs or permanently have things, or even teachers themselves can have a mobility issue. So you can't be without an elevator.
I'm glad to hear going forward, especially over the last couple of years, then going forward, we're getting a little bit further into the schematic design, and so that your concerns, David, can be addressed a little bit more effectively on cost. Again, we're never going to be able to predict in the bidding process what the overall cost is going to be, but we can get a more accurate assessment of what the components are and what's needed in order to proceed, so that the bids should at least land somewhere in that range, as opposed to this 2022 study, and then finding the additional requirements and stretch code applications and things like that that are now applied to these 3 construction projects.
I don't wish to argue with you. I agree with everything you just said, but I'll never yield that there isn't more we can do to avoid overruns. And I will continue to try to push on, at least my experience, on things we can do.
And what's your perspective there? Like, what are a couple of the ideas in terms of
Well,
specifics?
sometimes you put in a contract that there's a bonus if they complete it on time and for less money. I don't know if you can do that in in this environment, okay? But
Yeah.
sometimes there are bonuses for completing early and at less cost, as an example, okay? Sometimes there's, right in the contract that is it can't exceed. There are a bunch of things.
Right.
Maybe maybe there are purchasing or there are agencies out there that can help us who have a lot of experience in these type of contracts.
So the thing with that, David, though, is that unlike in a private sector where you'd go out to bid and you'd pull the contract information at that point in time, the bids have to go out through a procurement process, and so the contract isn't entered into until you've actually gone through the bidding process and award it to the qualified lowest bidder. And at that point in time, you're negotiating a contract. And at that point, you can add those type of contingencies into a contract. But until you reach that point, and we weren't at that point yet with this particular project,
I understand.
those kind of savings can't be baked in because you have to, unlike in a private sector process, you have to go through this bidding process.
I have no complaint on what's being done.
No, I'm not saying you do. I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for educating me on that. I didn't realize that was the situation. Yeah, because there's, in some of the other contracts like that I get to see and be involved with, it's a similar thing. Like, you can get creative in how you craft them, but if you have to wait that long, your window obviously
If
closes.
you have to go through a procurement process, yeah, you're kind of curtailed by that, yeah. Any other comments, questions, discussion? Hearing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Five in favor, 2 absent. Moving along, we have warrant article 3,
3.
Coolest Farm Perimeter Survey.
I make a motion to approve the Article 3 Coolest Farm Perimeter Survey in the amount of $33,600 from the Community Preservation Act as written.
I second it.
Discussion. I know this is going to devolve into other conversations, and there'll be.
Not if the moderator's on.
Well, you didn't let me finish. There will be. I guess I should have said there'll be an attempt to devolve into other discussions regarding this parcel of land, these 4 parcels of land. But as you stated, as Paul stated, this is really, no matter what we do with this property, a survey needs to be completed.
Yeah.
And that's what all this article is talking about. These are the costs. We went out, we checked to see what the survey costs might be. This is the estimate based upon those discussions. The survey will be completed for the 4 parcels, and then.
Then the fun begins.
Well, then the fun begins, but not at the special town meeting. And I'm sure the moderator will not
So
allow
I
it to
hope the
devolve.
moderator can,
Yes.
There is no doubt that he
There is
will.
no doubt that the moderator will.
they'll suppress it.
Yes. All right. Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
That's 5 in favor, 2 absent. Article 4, Library Union Collective Bargaining Agreement.
I move that we approve the Article 4 Library Union Collective Bargaining Agreement in the amount of $55,388 as written.
I second.
Discussion.
Good job.
Yep.
Yes.
I'm happy to see we have another collective bargaining agreement
Right.
on the books. We have
Good
2
job.
outstanding.
Prospectively, yet.
Well,
What is still outstanding?
well, it hasn't been voted on. It hasn't been accepted
Has to
by
be.
town meeting.
Right.
Has to be approved
Yeah.
by town meeting.
Yeah. So the 2 that are outstanding currently are the dispatcher and the firefighters unions.
So are they coming to town meeting, or they're not
No.
ready to come to town
No,
meeting?
they are not coming to town meeting. This is, we're done.
Okay. I'm just trying to say, if, like, August, I'll be back here?
No, it'll be October.
Oh, okay.
Unless something bizarre happens.
That one will, and if it is October, anything past July 1st will have that fun little exercise of retroactive adjustments for
Right.
the prior or the current then at that point in time fiscal year. Yeah, happy to see another one done. I'm glad we got it in before the 3-year period started.
Good stuff.
Yep. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
5 in favor, 2 absent. Article 5, regulations for private family mausoleums.
I have you do this one because I don't get it still.
I recommend approval of Article 5, regulations for private family cemetery, or private family mausoleums. Move that in accordance to the provision of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 114, Section 23, that the town approve regulations made by the Board of Cemetery Commissioners for private family mausoleums at all public burial grounds in town as printed in the materials that were distributed to the voters at this special town meeting.
I
Second.
Well, that was a dual second. Which one we take?
Give it to Elaine.
Discussion. And the regulations were the other document we threw up while we were talking about it. There is no height restriction currently, I guess. So,
That- that's-
at the discretion of the superintendent.
Can't be
That's-
more than 45 feet, though, right, Paul?
Yeah, it wouldn't,
Right.
Although it is granite. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it could be sturdy enough. Who
Um,
knows?
I just have a small concern that someone will get sort of weird with the statuary.
Oh, so the superintendent has control over that.
Yeah.
So I think that blanket control kind of protects that from being, and this is for the adoption of regulations, to approve regulations made by the Board of Cemetery. They can certainly be amended in the future if the need arises. If multiple people start saying, "Oh, I want to put a 50-foot statue there. I want to, put multicolored whatever."
It has to be granite, but it doesn't have to, you shouldn't say it has to be gray granite. It could be another color.
Any type of granite, yeah. I see what you're saying. I think that the safety net is in there currently, and it can be amended in the future if it absolutely needs to be.
Would there be people who were displeased with the judgment by the cemetery commissioner, superintendent?
So you're asking if
Right.
everyone always agrees with the
Yeah.
judgments made by individuals?
Right, and so then that creates so I'm just wondering if there should be a little bit more prescription in here to avoid those
Why we have elections, Steve.
conflicts in the future, And then sort of the continuity over time. All right, so that position is elected, it turns over.
Well, the superintendent is
Is
appointed,
appointed.
not elected.
Okay.
Yeah,
Who's excellent.
yeah.
Who appoints? I'm sorry, who appoints?
Cemetery Commissioner.
So the cemetery commissioners appoint, they get elected, and then they appoint the superintendent.
Okay. Seems a little convoluted, but okay.
Well, much like our board. So we are appointed, but we're appointed by the moderator who's elected. So John is not running after this year, and so there'll be a new moderator in, and that new moderator will be in charge of appointing this board.
And so somebody like me who's appointed by the previous person,
You're there for your 3 years, and then when it comes up, it's at the discretion of the moderator the moderator in that office at that time.
okay.
Supreme Court.
No.
like
Yeah,
that
our
appointments.
positions are not lifetime until mandatory retirement age. No.
Yeah, this one, so I listened to all the commentary over time, and this one kind of feels like, with the lighting, it was overly prescriptive. Remember that article?
And this
right?
one's under
This one
prescriptive.
feels a bit under prescriptive, and based on some of the feedback hearing, like, we need a little bit more guidance, I think. Because as much as I'd like to trust the judgment of one person, I don't know if there's enough consistency over time, right? So again, we also think about, this is kind of like, 3-foot setbacks. It's kind of like building codes in a lot of ways. And so once a mausoleum's there, it ain't changing, it's not moving, right? And so you have to be really careful and thoughtful. This is perpetual. Right? Again, I worked in a cemetery, that was my first job. right? And so you have to be really careful because this stuff is not going to change. So I'd be err on more side of caution, being prescriptive of this stuff ahead of time, in terms of height requirements, in terms of statuary, right? In terms of other things that once it's there, you can never change.
What do you mean you can't never change it? Why can't you?
I mean, would you go and like tear down someone's mausoleum?
I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
No, because you
Is
paid,
there an
aren't you,
ultimate
didn't
law
you
that
just
can't
charge
be
them some money
changed?
to keep it going?
Oh, you did charge money to keep them going, but who's going to enforce that? I mean,
Eventually, there's nobody.
eventually.
I think he and I just share the same,
I
same
understand
concerns.
your concerns. I
Yeah,
do.
it's like, what's that?
No, sorry.
Yeah, okay, pet.
Is there a requirement? It's human remains only. I mean,
Yes, I think they're actually, that I think is.
Yeah, actually, there. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there is.
okay.
And the license of burial deeds to all public cemetery lots in the town. There is a provision that has to be for the burial of human dead only.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is not a future site of a pet
You can be
mausoleum.
it.
Oh, yeah, they got it early.
That's not going to happen.
That's what you gotta do.
Yeah, I mean, in general, philosophy is like it makes sense, in that you get more.
Be with who?
You have a limited amount of space in your cemeteries. You're not going to get any more space ever. However, I just feel like there's not quite enough protection here.
Yeah, I would like to see a height restriction and statuary, just general statuary, what you can put up there. Would you have a statue of your, dog that you can't bury with you, but you have a little statue of him sitting on top of the mausoleum?
Yeah, I just imagine like driving by. Imagine you take the same route every day, every whatever, and you're passing by the cemetery. Like I do drop off like for my daughter, and it's like imagine something that's just
Untowards.
yeah. If there's so much regulation around how we are, the look and feel of the town, then this is also I think requires a certain
There's
level.
less restrictions on the mausoleum than there is on the party lights.
We gotta vote.
Yeah.
So it's just something I think we're flagging concern,
In the rule book, which I don't think will be provided at town meeting, right now, there are height and dimension requirements on all monuments that you see in the cemeteries and on the flush markers as well, which are, so named because they're flush with the surface of the turf. So the lots are standard sizes, and all the monuments, the sizes are regulated. So they have to, what I would envision is when a monument company or someone that sells a mausoleum wants to erect one of these, they have to file. If you want to put in a monument up right now in a town cemetery, you have to submit a monument permit to the cemetery office, and it has to be approved. And there are regulations on the foundation that goes in. So I don't want people to have the impression that a vendor is just going to show up and start building a mausoleum. They would have to submit plans and a description of it to the cemetery commission.
So you're trying to say is that if something gets to a certain height, you'd be like, dude, that's a monument.
No, I'm just saying they regulate right now the height, length, and width of existing monuments. Now, I admit those are different than mausoleums, but the cemetery has detailed regulations on the dimensions of monuments that can be erected in town cemeteries.
So that's a good question. Is a mausoleum a monument?
A mausoleum would be different. A monument is something that's on a lot where there are ground burials.
And that's what I think. And so that's where I think I'm going, is like if we have such good thought and foresight around how we're looking at monuments, that we should apply that same level of thought and approach to a mausoleum.
Yeah, no, all good points. I'll definitely share all this with the superintendent of cemeteries.
Any further discussion?
I'm going to vote yes, but it also just noting for the record that I wish it was a little more prescriptive.
I plan on voting no for that reason.
Or so.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Actually, I plan to abstain.
You're certainly entitled to do that.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't, yeah. sometimes the stuff that's the weirdest and the smallest is actually the stuff that catches your, what, attention.
Sure.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nays or abstentions?
Abstention?
Nay.
Okay, 3 in favor, 1 opposed, 1 abstention. That passes 3-1. All right. That brings us to a second period of public comment. Seeing no further public, I will bring, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. Review the reporting schedule. So we are meeting a little earlier than we needed to, only because didn't want to conflict with the zoning Board of Appeals, which has the first Thursday in every month. So we could have technically met next Thursday, but we would have been in competition with the Board of Appeals. So we do, however, have to get this book published 2 weeks ahead of time, as opposed to 1 week ahead of time, based upon the regulations in the town code. So we will want to put together a letter like we usually do, and then you put the book together. I think we'd want to try to get the book and the letter together by next Thursday. I'm trying to think, have you had any conversation with the printer? Or are we gonna do this in
Well,
town?
we're doing it the same way as last time.
Yeah, if Pam.
We'll just email it. Yeah.
I mean, we can print it in-house, okay.
Because it's just a few.
Because it's only,
pages.
it should be, yeah, okay, perfect.
June 5th.
So, let's see what the calendar brings us. So June 23rd is our special town meeting, so that means that it has to be published and at least posted on the website by the 9th. And so we're at the 29th. The 5th is a week from today. So let's try to have everything together by next Thursday, just so that we can get everything finalized and off on the Friday before, and that way we aren't scrambling Monday to get that posted and published. I'd ask that. So I don't need an answer on abstention, because abstention is a present vote. But on the nay, if you could just write something up about your reasoning behind why you voted the way you did,
Sure.
and send it to me, and I'll incorporate it into the letter for the book.
Sounds good.
That takes care of our reporting schedule, discussion, plans for upcoming meetings. So we will not. I don't think we're gonna have any more meetings until September. I'm not gonna say that with 100% certainty, but I can say probably with 90% certainty that we will not have another meeting until September. So we're looking at October town meeting is going to be the 27th or the 20th, Paul?
It is the third.
It's the third Monday.
Third Monday.
So it'll be October 20th. So we'll probably open our hearings
May not be here.
on the 11th, maybe, depending on when the town warrant's put together.
Sign the warrant on the 8th.
On the 8th. So so we'll probably, September 11th, but that may be our first evening that we have hearings, depending on availability of people at that point in
So
time.
when is the town meeting election?
There is no election until April of next year.
Okay.
Yeah. So it follows that almost fiscal year, where it happens in April. So we're following this next fiscal year. So we've done our budget town meeting, and then we'll have what's typically more of a adjustment town meeting, and what used to be a zoning town meeting. But zoning's kind of made its way into both.
So all zoning, all the time.
Yeah. So target September 11th, September 18th, September 25th, but we can, as we get closer, discuss that. But as Paul said, the 8th will be when the warrant's signed. At that point in time, we'll have an idea of what we're looking at as far as what we'll need to review. It's not like, for people that have gone through before, it's not like the budget process where we're meeting with a bunch of departments or anything like that. It's more having either Paul present based upon the town's articles, and John or Christine, depending on what the town's articles are, and then having any citizen petitioners come in and make their presentations. Typically a lot less legwork and a lot less of presentations for that. All right. Now would be public comment, but again, there's no public to comment. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. See you at town meeting.